I was 12 when my father brought home the woman who would change everything. Vanessa walked into our modest 3-bedroom house like she owned it, her twin daughters Madison and Brooklyn trailing behind her like designer shadows. Everything about them screamed money, from Madison's perfectly straightened hair to Brooklyn's expensive sneakers that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Hey beautiful souls. Take a second to subscribe, drop a friendly hi in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Now let's continue the story. And meet your new family, Dad said, his voice carrying that forced cheerfulness that made my stomach churn. He'd been different since Mom died 2 years earlier, desperate to fill the void she left behind. Vanessa's smile was plastic perfect as she looked me up and down. Oh, she's precious, she said, the word dripping with fake sweetness. Madison snickered behind her manicured hand while Brooklyn just stared at me like I was some exotic pet. Within a week, the changes started. My bedroom, the one with the window that caught morning sunlight, the one where Mom used to read me bedtime stories, suddenly became Madison's art studio. She needs space for her creativity, Vanessa explained while I stood there clutching my favorite stuffed elephant, Mr. Peanuts. Where am I supposed to sleep? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Vanessa's eyes glittered with something cold. We'll figure something out, sweetie. That something turned out to be the converted shed in our backyard. Dad had built it years ago as his workshop, but now it was being transformed into what Vanessa called my special space. The insulation was thin, the single window barely let in light, and in winter I could see my breath fog in the air. It's like having your own apartment, Dad said weakly, avoiding my eyes. You're becoming such a big girl, Anne. Most kids would love this independence. But I wasn't most kids. I was a 12-year-old girl who just wanted to belong somewhere. The shed became my prison disguised as privilege. Vanessa made sure everyone knew it was my choice. And just loves her independence, she'd tell neighbors with that same plastic smile. Some children are just naturally more self-sufficient. Meanwhile, Madison and Brooklyn got the run of the house. Brooklyn took over what used to be Dad's home office, turning it into her gaming paradise with multiple monitors and a gaming chair that probably cost more than my monthly allowance. Madison's art studio, my former bedroom, was stocked with supplies that could fund a small country. The worst part wasn't the cold seeping through the shed walls at night, or the way rain drummed against the thin roof like angry fingers. It was watching Dad pretend everything was normal. He'd bring me dinner on a paper plate like I was some outdoor pet, while the rest of the family ate off the good china in the warm dining room. This is temporary, baby girl, he'd whisper during his brief visits to the shed. Just until we figure out the space situation. But weeks turned into months. The space situation never got figured out. Instead, I learned to navigate the narrow path between the house and shed in darkness, to wrap myself in every blanket I owned, to study by the light of a desk lamp that cast shadows that looked like monsters on the walls. School became my refuge, but even there, Vanessa's influence followed me. When parent-teacher conferences came around, she'd show up dressed to the nines, playing the concerned stepmother perfectly. Anne's going through a difficult adjustment period, she'd tell my teachers. We're giving her space to process her feelings. Space. Always space. As if isolation was therapy. The breaking point came on my 13th birthday. I woke up that morning hoping stupidly that things might be different. Maybe Dad would remember. Maybe there'd be a cake, a celebration, something to acknowledge that I still mattered. Instead, I found the family in the kitchen, celebrating Brooklyn's soccer team win with store-bought cupcakes and genuine laughter. Happy birthday to me, I whispered to the empty shed that night, Mr. Peanuts tucked under my arm. I'd outgrown him years ago, but he was the last piece of Mom I had left. The last thing that smelled like home instead of sawdust and loneliness. The next morning, Dad knocked on the shed door at 7 sharp. His face carried guilt like a heavy coat. And I'm so sorry about yesterday. I completely forgot. It's fine, I lied because what else could I say? That I'd spent my birthday eating a gas station cupcake I bought with my allowance? That I'd blown out a single birthday candle while his new family laughed in the warm house 50 feet away? Let me make it up to you, he said, pulling out his wallet. Here's $50. Buy yourself something nice. $50. The same amount Vanessa spent on Brooklyn's weekly nail appointments. School became my sanctuary, but even there I felt marked. When classmates talked about sleepovers and family dinners, I'd make excuses. How do you explain that your room doesn't have central heating? That your stepmother serves your meals on paper plates while her daughters eat off family heirloom china? Mrs. Holcomb, my English teacher, started staying after class to ask if I was okay. You seem tired lately, Anne. Everything all right at home? Everything's perfect, I'd lie, perfecting Vanessa's plastic smile. I just love my independence. But Mrs. Holcomb saw through it. One day, she pulled me aside after a particularly brutal essay assignment about family traditions. My paper had been notably short. And you can talk to me, right? About anything. I wanted to tell her everything. About the space heater that barely worked, about eating dinner alone while watching my family through the kitchen window, about feeling like a ghost haunting my own life. But what would be the point? Adults always took other adults' sides. I'm fine, Mrs. Holcomb. Really? That afternoon, I came home to find Vanessa in the kitchen, her face tight with that particular anger she saved just for me. Madison stood behind her, arms crossed, wearing that smug expression that meant trouble. And we need to talk. Vanessa's perfectly manicured nails drummed against the granite countertop as she fixed me with her coldest stare. Madison hovered nearby like a vulture, barely containing her excitement at whatever drama was about to unfold. Your teacher called today, Vanessa began, her voice dripping with false concern. Apparently, you've been telling people that we don't treat you well at home. My stomach dropped. I never said. Mrs. Holcomb was very concerned about your living situation, she continued, making air quotes around the words. She seemed to think there might be some kind of problem. Madison snickered. She's probably making up stories for attention, Mom. You know how she is. How I was. Like I was some kind of problem child instead of a 13-year-old girl trying to survive in a family that treated me like an inconvenient houseplant. I didn't tell her anything, I said, my voice shaking despite my efforts to stay calm. She just asked if I was okay. And what did you tell her? Vanessa's eyes narrowed. That everything was fine. Good. She stepped closer and I caught a whiff of her expensive perfume, the same scent that now permeated what used to be my home. Because if I get another call from your school expressing concern about your welfare, there will be consequences. Do you understand me? I understood perfectly. Keep your mouth shut or things get worse. The unspoken threat hung in the air like smoke. That night, I lay in the shed listening to the family dinner conversation drifting through the thin walls. They were planning a vacation to Disney World. All of them except me, of course. Anne's just not interested in family trips, I heard Vanessa explain to Dad. She prefers her alone time. When had I ever said that? When had anyone asked what I preferred? The shed felt smaller that night, the walls pressing in like they were trying to squeeze the last bit of hope out of me. I pulled Mr. Peanuts closer and tried to remember Mom's voice, but it was getting harder each day. Vanessa's voice was louder, more insistent, drowning out the gentle memories I desperately wanted to keep. Through the window, I watched Brooklyn and Madison in their shared bedroom, probably gossiping about boys or planning their next shopping spree with Dad's credit card. 2 years passed in a blur of cold nights and lonelier days. I learned to time my movements perfectly, shower when everyone else was asleep, eat breakfast before anyone came downstairs, disappear before dinner conversations could remind me of my invisible status in this house. But on my 15th birthday, something inside me finally snapped. I woke up that morning to find the shed door padlocked from the outside. Panic shot through me as I rattled the handle, calling out until my voice was hoarse. Finally, Madison appeared at the window, grinning like this was the best joke she'd ever heard. Mom says you're grounded for leaving dirty dishes in the sink, she announced. You can come out when you learn to be more considerate. The dirty dishes. 2 plates and a cup I'd washed but apparently hadn't dried to Vanessa's standards. I spent my 15th birthday locked in a shed like an animal, using a bucket in the corner because I couldn't reach the bathroom, surviving on the emergency granola bars I'd hidden under my bed. When Dad finally came home from his business trip that evening and released me, his face went white. Vanessa, what the hell happened here? Anne's been acting out, she said smoothly, not even looking up from her magazine. I thought some time to reflect might help her attitude. You locked her in there? For how long? Just today. She's fine. But I wasn't fine. I was done. That night, after everyone was asleep, I started planning. If they wanted to treat me like I didn't belong here, maybe it was time to find somewhere I did. I'd been saving my allowance for 2 years. Not much, but enough for a bus ticket. Mrs. Holcomb had given me her sister's phone number months ago, just in case. Her sister ran a group home for teens, she'd said. Good kids who just need a safe place to figure things out. I pulled out the crumpled piece of paper and stared at the number. Tomorrow was Saturday. Vanessa and the girls would be at Madison's art exhibition, Dad would be playing golf, and I'd have the house to myself long enough to pack what mattered and disappear. For the first time in years, I felt something besides resignation. I felt hope. But fate had other plans. The phone call came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in March. I jolted awake in the shed, my heart hammering as I heard Dad's voice through the thin walls, sharp with panic. What do you mean collapsed? Is she conscious? Which hospital? Through my small window, I watched lights flickering on throughout the house. Car doors slammed, engines started, and then silence settled over the property like a heavy blanket. I found out later that Vanessa had collapsed during her morning yoga class. What started as dizziness and fatigue had escalated into something much more serious. The woman who'd controlled every aspect of our household with military precision was suddenly vulnerable, her perfectly constructed world crumbling around her. Dad came to the shed that afternoon, his face aged 10 years overnight. And I need to tell you something. Vanessa's in the hospital. They're running tests, but it might be serious. I sat on my narrow bed, Mr. Peanuts in my lap, waiting to feel something. Sympathy maybe. Concern for the woman who'd made my life miserable. Instead, I felt nothing but a strange, hollow curiosity. Is she going to be okay? We don't know yet. Dad rubbed his eyes, and for the first time in years he looked at me, really looked at me. Jesus, and when did you get so thin? And this place? He glanced around the shed as if seeing it for the first time. This isn't right. This isn't what your mother would have wanted. Too little, too late, I thought, but didn't say it. The diagnosis came 3 days later. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Aggressive, advanced, requiring immediate treatment. Suddenly, the woman who'd spent years making me invisible needed every bit of help she could get. Madison and Brooklyn moved through the house like ghosts, their usual confidence shattered by their mother's mortality. Without Vanessa's iron control, the household routines fell apart. Dirty dishes piled up, laundry went unwashed, and meals consisted of whatever takeout Dad ordered between hospital visits. "Anne," he said one evening, standing awkwardly at the shed door. "I know this is a lot to ask, but the girls are struggling. Maybe you could help out around the house? Just until their mother gets better. Help out." After 3 years of being treated like hired help, now they needed me to actually become it. I found the medical records by accident, tucked between insurance papers Dad had asked me to organize while he spent another 18-hour day at the hospital. Vanessa's file was thick, full of test results and doctor's notes I couldn't understand, but one phrase kept appearing: patient will require compatible donor for potential bone marrow transplant. My hands shook as I read further. Blood type O negative. Rare. The same type listed on my own medical card from my last school physical. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who'd spent years making me feel worthless might literally need my blood to survive. Madison found me in the kitchen that evening, staring at the papers spread across the counter. Her face was swollen from crying, her usual pristine appearance replaced by wrinkled clothes and unwashed hair. "What are you looking at?" she demanded, then saw the medical records. "Those are private. You have no right." "She needs a bone marrow donor," I said quietly. "The same blood type I have." Madison's face went white. You could save her? Could? The word hung between us like a bridge neither of us knew how to cross. "Why would she?" Brooklyn appeared in the doorway, her voice bitter. "After everything we've done to her? I wouldn't blame her if she let Mom die." The casual cruelty of it, even directed at their own mother, reminded me why I'd spent 3 years planning my escape. These people didn't understand love, only transactions. Only what they could take from others. "I need to think," I said, gathering the papers. That night, I sat in the shed with my packed duffel bag at my feet. Tomorrow was supposed to be Freedom Day, my 16th birthday, the day I'd finally buy that bus ticket and disappear forever. But now, through the window, I could see Madison and Brooklyn in the kitchen, probably eating ice cream for dinner because no one had bothered to cook. They looked young and scared and utterly lost without their mother's constant direction. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction at their pain. They'd watched me suffer for years without lifting a finger. Why should I care about theirs? But another part of me, The part that still remembered Mom's bedtime stories about kindness and forgiveness, whispered something different. The call came at dawn. Dad's voice was thick with exhaustion and something that might have been tears. "And I need you to come to the hospital. No. There's something we need to discuss." I found them in the family conference room. Dad, Madison, Brooklyn, and Dr. Maldonado, Vanessa's oncologist. The girls looked like they'd been crying for hours, their faces puffy and red. "And," Dr. Maldonado began gently, "I understand you and your stepmother have a complicated relationship, but we need to discuss the possibility of you being tested as a potential bone marrow donor." "She's our only hope," Madison whispered. "The donor registry doesn't have any matches and time is running out." I looked at my stepsister, really looked at her for the first time in years. Gone was the smug confidence, the casual cruelty that had defined our relationship. In its place was raw terror at the prospect of losing her mother. What would it involve? I asked Dr. Maldonado. "First, we'd need to do comprehensive blood tests to confirm compatibility. If you're a match, the donation process itself is significant but manageable for someone your age. There would be some discomfort but no long-term health risks." Brooklyn leaned forward. "And I know we've been awful to you. But please. She's all we have." The plea in her voice was genuine, probably the most honest emotion I'd ever heard from either of them. But it wasn't their tears that swayed me, it was Dad's face. He looked broken, caught between the family he'd chosen and the daughter he'd failed to protect. "I'll do the tests," I said finally. "But I have conditions." The room went silent except for the soft beeping of medical equipment in the hallway. "First, I want to see her. I want to talk to Vanessa alone before I make any final decisions." Dad nodded quickly. "Of course, anything. Second, if I do this, if I save her life, things change. The way I've been treated, where I live, how I'm regarded in this family. Everything changes or the deal's off." Madison and Brooklyn exchanged glances. They knew exactly what I was talking about. "Anne," Dad said softly, "you shouldn't have to bargain for basic decency." "I should have. You should have done a lot of things," I cut him off. "But we're here now and these are my terms." Vanessa looked smaller in the hospital bed, her once perfect appearance ravaged by chemotherapy. The expensive highlights had fallen out in patches, her carefully maintained tan had faded to a sickly yellow, and her manicured nails were brittle and broken. But her eyes, those cold, calculating eyes that had looked through me for 3 years, remained the same. "So," she said when I entered the room alone, "come to gloat." I pulled a chair close to her bed, close enough to see the fear behind her defiant mask. "I came to talk. The doctors told you, didn't they? About what I need from you." Her voice was hoarse from the treatments, but the disdain was unmistakable. "I suppose you think this is poetic justice. Do you remember my 13th birthday?" I asked quietly. She blinked, clearly not expecting the question. "What?" "My 13th birthday. You were in the kitchen celebrating Brooklyn's soccer win while I ate a gas station cupcake alone in the shed." "I don't see what." "Or the time you locked me in the shed for an entire day because I left water spots on dishes. I was 15, Vanessa. 15 years old, and you locked me up like an animal." Her jaw tightened. "You were difficult. Ungrateful. Your father and I were trying to blend our families, and you made it impossible. I was 12 when you moved in. 12 years old and grieving my mother, and instead of helping me heal, you decided I was the problem. You were the problem." The words exploded out of her, sharp and vicious despite her weakened state. "Walking around that house like some tragic little ghost, making everyone feel guilty just by existing. Your father couldn't move on because you were there, constantly reminding him of what he'd lost." The truth of it hit me like a physical blow. This whole time I'd thought she was cruel for sport. I never realized she saw me as a threat to her happiness. "So you tried to erase me," I said. "Push me so far to the margins that maybe I'd just disappear. And now here you are," she said bitterly, "holding my life in your hands. You must be loving this." I studied her face. The fear she was trying so hard to hide, the desperate hope battling with pride. "Actually, I pity you." 3 days later, Dr. Maldonado called with the results. I was a perfect match. Not just compatible but ideal. The medical team was already preparing for the transplant procedure, scheduling surgeries and coordinating treatment protocols. But first I had one more conversation to have. I found Madison and Brooklyn in the hospital cafeteria, picking at plastic salads and looking lost. Without their mother's constant guidance, they seemed younger, more vulnerable than I'd ever seen them. "Anne," Madison said as I approached their table, "did you get the results?" I sat down across from them, studying these girls who'd been my tormentors for so long. "I'm a perfect match." Brooklyn's face crumpled with relief. "Thank God. When can you do it?" "The doctors said time is critical." "There's something I need you both to understand first," I interrupted. "I'm going to save your mother's life. But I'm not doing it for her and I'm not doing it for you." They exchanged confused glances. "I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. Because my mother raised me to believe that every life has value, even when that person has made my life hell." I leaned forward. "But make no mistake. After this we're even. More than even. I will have given your mother the most precious gift one person can give another, and neither of you will ever forget that." Madison's eyes filled with tears. "And I'm so sorry. We were kids and we just followed Mom's lead and—" "You were 17 last month, Madison. When exactly did you plan to develop your own moral compass?" The harsh words hung in the air between us. Brooklyn was crying openly now, mascara streaming down her cheeks. "We'll make it up to you," she whispered. "After Mom gets better, everything will be different. We promise." "No," I said firmly. "You don't get to promise me anything. You get to prove it day by day, choice by choice. And if you don't—" I stood up, my chair scraping against the linoleum floor. "If you don't, I'll know exactly what your gratitude is worth." The transplant was scheduled for the following Tuesday. 5 days to prepare, physically and mentally, for the procedure that would save the life of the woman who'd tried to destroy mine. The bone marrow extraction took 4 hours. I woke up in a haze of anesthesia and pain medication, my hip throbbing where they'd inserted the needles. Dad was beside my bed, holding my hand like he hadn't done since I was small. "How do you feel, baby girl?" "Like I got hit by a truck," I mumbled through the fog. "How's Vanessa?" "The transplant went well. Her body's accepting the donation. The doctors are cautiously optimistic." I closed my eyes, processing what I'd just done. Somewhere in this hospital, Vanessa was fighting for her life with my bone marrow flowing through her veins. My DNA was literally keeping her alive. Over the next few days as I recovered from the procedure, something shifted in the family dynamic. Madison and Brooklyn visited constantly, bringing homework from my teachers and magazines they thought I might like. Their attempts at conversation were awkward but genuine. "I brought you some of those cookies from the bakery downtown," Brooklyn said on my 3rd day in the hospital. "The ones with the chocolate chips you used to like." Past tense, because none of them had bothered to learn my current preferences. "Thank you," I said simply, not making it easier for her. Dad spent hours by my bedside and for the first time in years we actually talked. About Mom, about his mistakes, about the 3 years of pain we'd all pretended wasn't happening. "I failed you," he said one evening, tears in his eyes. "I was so desperate to give you a mother figure after losing yours that I ignored how she was treating you. I'll never forgive myself for that." "I don't need your guilt, Dad," I replied. "I need you to do better." "I will. I promise you, and no matter what happens with Vanessa, things will be different." But the real test came when Vanessa was finally strong enough for visitors. The doctors said her recovery was remarkable, faster than they'd dared hope. The transplant had taken perfectly, and her body was producing healthy blood cells again. "She wants to see you," Dad said nervously. "To thank you." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to avoid her entirely, to let my actions speak for themselves. But another part needed closure. Needed to look into the eyes of the woman whose life I'd saved and know that she understood what I'd done. Vanessa looked better than she had in weeks, color returning to her cheeks and strength to her voice. But when I entered her hospital room, something had changed in her demeanor. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something I'd never seen from her before: humility. "Anne," she said softly. "Thank you." I sat in the visitor's chair, studying her face. "You're welcome. I know those words aren't enough. Nothing I say could be enough." She struggled to sit up straighter. "I've had a lot of time to think these past weeks, lying here knowing I might die. Thinking about the life I've lived, the choices I've made." "And what conclusions did you reach?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. That I've been a terrible person. Especially to you. Yes, you have. The blunt agreement seemed to surprise her. I told myself I was protecting my girls, making sure they had the best of everything. I convinced myself that you were competition for your father's attention, for resources, for love. So you tried to make me disappear. I did. Her voice cracked. I treated you like you were worthless when you were just a child who'd lost her mother and needed compassion. I can't undo that, Anne. I can't give you back those years or take away the pain I caused. I waited, sensing there was more. But I want you to know that what you did, saving my life when you had every reason to let me die, it's changed something in me. You showed me a kind of grace I didn't know existed. I didn't do it for you, I said firmly. I did it because it was right. I know. That makes it even more powerful. Tears were flowing down her cheeks now. I don't deserve your forgiveness, Anne. But I'm going to spend whatever time I have left trying to earn it. I stood up to leave, then paused at the door. Vanessa. Yes. When you get home, the shed becomes your space. I'm moving back into the house, into a real bedroom with heat and windows and dignity. And if you ever try to push me to the margins again, I'll remind you whose bone marrow is keeping you alive. Her face went white, but she nodded. I understand. Good. Because this is your second chance at life, and my first chance at being treated like I belong in my own family. Don't waste either one. 6 months later, I was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework when Vanessa came in from her afternoon walk. Her hair was growing back, still thin but healthy, and her color was almost back to normal. The doctors called her recovery miraculous. Anne, she said hesitantly, could I talk to you for a minute? I looked up from my calculus homework. The same subject I'd struggled with alone in the shed, trying to learn by lamplight and willpower. What's up? She sat across from me at the table where I now ate every meal, where I was included in family conversations, and asked about my day. I've been thinking about something. Your 18th birthday is coming up, and I know you've been looking at colleges. I nodded, wary. My grades had improved dramatically once I had proper lighting, heating, and wasn't constantly exhausted from the stress of survival. I want to pay for your education, she said. Full ride wherever you want to go. It's the least I can do. You don't owe me anything, Vanessa. We're even. No, we're not. She reached across the table, stopping just short of touching my hand. We'll never be even, Anne. You gave me my life back. But more than that, you taught me what real strength looks like. What grace looks like. I studied her face, looking for traces of the woman who'd made my teenage years a nightmare. They were there, but softer now, tempered by mortality and gratitude. There's something else, she continued. The doctors say I need regular checkups for the rest of my life. There's always a chance the cancer could come back, and if it does. She took a shaky breath. If it does, you're the only compatible donor in the world for me. The weight of that statement settled between us. For the rest of Vanessa's life, she would be dependent on my goodwill for her survival. The woman who'd tried to erase me from existence now carried a piece of me in her very bones. I know that's a burden you shouldn't have to carry, she said. But I want you to know that if that day comes, I'll understand if you say no. After what I put you through, I'll understand. I looked out the kitchen window toward the shed, my former prison that was now Vanessa's art studio, a place where she painted watercolors and worked through her trauma from nearly dying. The irony wasn't lost on me that she'd found peace in the same space where she'd tried to hide me away. If that day comes, I said finally, I'll make the same choice I made before. Not because you deserve it, but because it's who I choose to be. Her eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, I said, returning to my homework. Thank me by being the mother Madison and Brooklyn need, and by treating me like the family member I've always been. As the sun set outside our kitchen window, I realized something had fundamentally changed. Not just in our family, but in me. I'd learned that real power isn't about revenge or making others suffer as they made you suffer. Real power is in choosing mercy when justice would be easier, in saving lives when destruction would be more satisfying. I was no longer the scared 12-year-old who'd been banished to a shed. I was an daughter, survivor, lifesaver, and finally, after all these years, truly home. But sometimes, late at night, I still wondered what would have happened if I'd chosen differently. If I'd walked away and let cancer take the woman who'd stolen my childhood. The thought didn't shame me anymore. It reminded me that mercy is only meaningful when cruelty is also an option. And in the end, I'd chosen to be better than the people who'd raised me. That, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all.